Finally, I was old enough. Old enough to know how to run on 2 feet, while still young enough to not know I'd never catch what I was chasing. The soles of 2 feet began their inevitable task of swiftly tracing footsteps through the blades of the grass, where my 2 legs had been rapidly racing. Now sweat perspired, covering my forehead like the morning dew on a car's windscreen, forming miniature rivers that would stream down my eyelids, clouding the direction I was facing. All the while, the faster I ran, the more the shadow found its way of escaping. I never caught the shadow I was chasing. Funny enough, I never stopped chasing, for the older I grew, the more I pursued shadows. This time in the world, worldliness, only to become part of the worldly mess, a slave to fashion to be a slave in a world that told me I'd only be happy the more I got paid. Money, materialistic. The materialism was all around. The only thing in this world that scared me was silence. So I numbed it with the sound of music. Drums began blasting through these eardrums as the silence was successfully drowned, as I filled this frontal lobe with anything and everything these 2 eyes' curiosity now found. Yet the more I chased, the more I found. I could never numb the silence with the sound. You can never numb the silence with the sound. I never caught the shadows I was chasing, until one day, while going back through history, I uncovered his story. And then, finally I was old enough to start to understand the meaning behind the words conquer and conquest, while still young enough to have the faith of a child and see my sins confessed, as I traded my filthy clothes for this man's robe, which was perfectly spotless. So let me tell you his story. Finally, one day, he was old enough for his 2 hands to have mastered the art of carpenter's tools, while still young enough to switch careers. One day, the winding road of those 2 lonely feet became clear, as the word of life began to speak the words of life to a nation who would listen but never hear, who would follow from a distance but never come near enough to be changed into his likeness, to be filled with the fruits of the Spirit and reflect his kindness, the nation who never had the time to spend around Jesus and by faith be made righteous. Yet still, he went fishing, hoping and wishing to catch all who were swimming in their sins. You see, he gave himself as bait for the fish to bite, for sinners to eat the bread of life and be drawn by cords of love to the heavenly shore, there at last to eat forevermore from the tree of life and drink from those crystal clear waters, no longer as outcasts, but as sons and daughters of God. And there, up there, in that holy city, you will find there is no darkness, there is no night. You'll look around in every direction and there'll be no shadows in sight as far as your eyes can see. For light is the only substance that can make shadows leave. Light is the only substance that can make your shadows leave. Jesus, the light of the world, is the only one who can make your shadows leave. When will you stop chasing?